Tonight's episode is brought to you by Cryptic Crate, the first and only monthly box subscription service for fans of cryptozoology. If you're interested in getting nearly $80 worth of cryptid-themed items for a mere $39.99, Cryptic Crate is the place for you. Simply visit crypticrate.com for more information and use coupon code MONSTERS88 for 10% off your first box. Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. Welcome to the show and welcome to this disaster of a studio. Over the past couple days, I've been furiously working to get this new Mac Mini up and running. Well, at least new to me. A lot of people have sent me messages saying, well, why didn't you just buy some brand new equipment? Why are you messing around with all this old stuff? Well, the answer's pretty easy, actually. I simply don't have the budget to work with new equipment, so I'm forced to buy used equipment and somehow make it work. So thank you all so much for the patience, but I think we're finally up and running. Now I have an excellent show lined up for you guys. It's not a grab bag per se, but it is loosely a grab bag. See, the situation here is that I'm leaving for Crypticon tomorrow, and I actually have a handful of episodes I need to do before I leave. So this is going to be interesting. Speaking of Crypticon, September 7th and 8th, Lexington, Kentucky. I highly recommend you guys be there. Not only will I be hosting the town hall meeting, I believe that's at 5 o'clock on Saturday, but I'll also have a booth where you can pick up some cryptic crates, you can pick up some Monsters Among Us gear, and you can meet me. And believe it or not, even Addie Lloyd and Tony Bell will be in attendance. So if you'd like to meet at least most of the Monsters Among Us crew, that's a great chance to do so. Now, in addition to all the stuff I just told you about, there are tons of reality TV stars, cryptid researchers, and of course, tons of vendors. So I highly recommend you make your way down. And if you're a Cryptic Crate subscriber and you're expected to get the September box, which ships out today, there's a free ticket in there for you. So if you don't get your box in time, simply reach out to me and I'll try to hook you up. The timeline with the tickets and everything was just a little bit hairy. Alright, what do you guys say we get on with the program? So to kick things off this evening, our first call of the night comes to us from Adam, and it involves a hotel ghost in a very famous location.
Hey there, my name is Adam. It's a story that I've never really told too many people, but I've always had an affinity for the paranormal, but never really had too many experiences myself. However, when I was, I think around 20 years old, that would be around 1997, 1996, I played college football for a pretty big team in major college football, and we did a lot of traveling during the season, but we were in New Orleans playing a pretty big game, and we stayed at the hotel that was actually connected to the Superdome. And, we always were on the road week in, week out, so it wasn't anything different, but it was unusual. When I got my room, it was way out of the way. It really kind of threw me off. And I had honestly, for the first time in my life, I had a really weird feeling just walking to my room that night. And I had a roommate, and the guys would constantly be all over the hotel after we did our meetings and had a little free time. So that particular night, I was exceptionally tired. I do remember that because I went back to the room early, and we were on the top floor. And I can't exactly remember the hotel, but we were on the top floor and at the very furthest end away from everybody. So it was a long walk to get down to the lobby. And I had a really weird feeling walking to the room. I get to the room. My roommate wasn't there. It was around 7 o'clock, right after dinner, and I just laid on top of the sheets on the bed and was just watching some TV. And I dozed off. And I remember on more than one occasion, I believe it was 2 times, not more than that, maybe 3, where I felt like a hand was in my face, or somebody was actually very close to me. And it was a double king-size bedroom or queen, whatever, double room. And I would open my eyes and it would pull me out of sleep. And I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, oh, yeah, that's kind of weird. And later that night, probably another hour or 2 later, my roommate comes in, and we always have the same roommates. And he comes in, he's loud, he wakes me up. I turn off all the lights at that point. He's watching TV, and I doze back off. The next time I woke up, it was the same exact feeling, and I woke up in the middle of the night, probably around 2. And out of what I could hear from that point is my roommate saying, hey. And I thought maybe he had woken me up. I had the same feeling, but he was trying to get my attention. And he's like, what are you doing? And I remember saying, what are you talking about? And he's like, man, there's somebody standing. He goes, I thought you were standing over your bed. And I look up and I see you laying there. And he saw like a shadowy type person, but it was really odd. And he turns on all the lights, and he's like, he was shocked, number one, but he said, saw somebody standing up. They were like leaning over, looking at you. It looked like they had their arms crossed. And when I pulled myself up out of bed to say, like, well, what are you doing? He said he could only really see a torso. And he said at that point, he covered himself back up and started saying, screaming my name. Or not screaming, but trying to whisper my name. And that is apparently the time that I woke up. So we turned the lights on. I thought he was messing with me. It wasn't uncommon for him to do this, but there was absolutely fear in his eye. And so we stayed up. We couldn't really go back to sleep. He turned the TV on and contemplated trying to get another room, and I wasn't moving at that point. I really wasn't that scared. However, the next morning, I knew something legitimate had happened because he was still talking about it, number one. And the next morning, my roommate had gotten up, and he told me that it looked like whatever it was had its arms crossed and leaning over me and staring somewhat in an angry way. And still to this day, I'm in contact with all my old friends from college, and the story only comes up with him. He always makes a point to bring it up. And since then, I haven't had anything happen. I wouldn't be too upset if it did. But regardless, that's my story. I hope you can get some use out of it. And I just want to say I really like the podcast, and I hope you are able to continue it as long as possible. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Adam. I'm actually a huge college football fan, so I think the fact that you actually played college ball makes this story even more fun for me. Now, of course, the city of New Orleans is steeped in history, and I don't even know if that's strong enough a term to put it in perspective. I honestly have no idea what sat where the Superdome and surrounding hotels are now, but I have a pretty good feeling that there was stuff sitting there well before that stadium was built. And even if there wasn't, there was plenty of bloodshed in that region over the past couple centuries that could warrant some sort of strange paranormal activity. Either way, it's an incredible story, and hopefully you won your big game. Thank you again, Adam, for taking the time to share your call. Our next call of the evening comes to us from Roger in the state of Indiana.
Hi, Derek. My name's Roger. I'm from Evansville, Indiana. This was a UFO sighting that happened to me in September of 2012. My wife and I were out walking our dog, and we had not been dog owners before. We'd always had cats, but we had a dog, so we were kind of learning what that was all about, and dogs like to go on walks. I should mention that my wife is a complete skeptic, doesn't have a belief in a lot of paranormal things, certainly has no interest in UFOs. And that's kind of important because she was the one that saw this UFO first. It was, I guess, what would be called the typical black triangle or delta UFO. And we were watching it float, and I used to work for an airline, so I was very familiar with what planes look like, normal planes at altitude. And this was kind of floating, not moving very fast, almost like a blimp or a lighter than the air, is what a pilot friend of mine said that they're called. In any case, the thing that was particularly strange about this, it was nighttime, so all we could really see was the 3 points of light, just 3 solid red lights on each of the points of the triangle. But at one point, it was directly overhead, and it was a clear, cloudless, starry night, and this thing passed over a cloud, and instead of blocking out the star, you could actually see the star through it, but it became distorted, almost like you were looking through a glass of water or something like that. And then it kind of floated off to the east and away from us, and we watched it until it was out of sight. This occurred in a residential neighborhood. I didn't see anyone else out, but when I looked up the incident the next day, there was another resident who had reported it to MUFON. So I have no idea what it was. I definitely didn't think aliens. I was thinking, something more along the lines of maybe like a government vehicle. But the thing that really confuses me is, if this thing's basically see-through, at nighttime it would have essentially been invisible. So why have the 3 points of light on it? If it was a government thing, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Anyway, that was my sighting. I did some research on it, and I found out that there are some materials that are like very lightweight, transparent plastics. A friend of mine who's a pilot, said that the characteristics were a lot like a blimp or a lighter than air. But as far as what it was, who was flying it, or what it was doing over a relatively small town in southern Indiana, I have no idea. And that's my story. Hope you can use it on the show. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Roger. Now, this story should come as no surprise because we've experienced quite a few wedge UFOs or black triangles over the years. And believe it or not, Monsters Among Us is not the only place to report these kind of stories. In fact, I remember an Unsolved Mysteries segment about the Belgium UFO sightings. I've actually linked to that segment in tonight's show notes. In addition, in the year 2000, there was a flap of sightings one night in southern Illinois, a UFO that was reportedly seen by a number of police officers. For more on that story, check this out.
4 a.m. At the Regional 911 Center located in Belleville, all conversations are recorded. This tape begins with a radio dispatch from 911 operator Tina Joaquin.
Someone just received a call from Highland PD. Reference to a truck driver just stopped in and said there was a flying object in the area of Lebanon. It was like a 2-story house. It had white lights and red blinking lights, and it was last seen southwest over Lebanon. Possibly, could you check the area?
An officer on patrol in the city of Lebanon, Illinois, responded to the dispatcher's query.
Did they say if the truck driver was DUI or anything?
He said he was serious.
Just a quick question. If I happen to find it, what am I supposed to do with it?
After searching for 2 minutes, the officer radioed the dispatcher.
Hey, be advised, there's a very bright white light east of town, and it keeps changing colors. I'll go there and see if maybe it's an aircraft. It doesn't look like an aircraft, though. So that's affirmative. Not the moon, it's not a star. Would you contact Scott Air Force Base to see if they have anything flying in this area, please? Well, whether it's a plane or not, it's heading westbound now. Matter of fact, if a shadow officer looks up, they can probably see it by now.
6 miles southwest, a call came from another police officer, this time in Shiloh, Illinois.
2550. I see something, but I don't know what the heck it is.
13 miles southwest in Millstadt, another police witness reported a similar sighting.
CENTCOM 6004.
Go ahead.
I've got that object inside also.
Are you serious?
It's huge.
Does it look like a... What does it look like to you?
It's kind of V-shaped. Really.
Moments later, a fourth police witness, an officer from DuPont, Illinois, contacted the dispatcher.
When I first seen it, I with binoculars, you can see the different colors. Now it appears to be white. Very large. It's hard to tell. It's pretty far off in the distance. This object was above me about 500 feet, and it was huge.
There were no more calls to the dispatcher. Whatever it was, if indeed there was anything, vanished into the night skies over Illinois.
Now, unfortunately, I couldn't lock down the exact name of this special program, but I can tell you that it came from the National Geographic Channel. If you'd like to check out this segment and the full 5-part series, I highly recommend you check out the show notes for tonight's episode. I don't know if these are extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, or perhaps simply experimental military craft. Either way, the story is amazing. Thank you for taking the time to share it. For our next submission, we head south. The following is Tony's submission.
Hi, my name is Tony, and I'm from Marietta, Georgia. I have found your podcast after the experience that happened to me took place about a month ago. My cousin had called me on a FaceTime call to ask me some questions about an assignment that she was working on. She's a freshman in college. And as we were talking, it was a normal FaceTime conversation. She was showing me her assignment, and I could see her boyfriend. She was at her boyfriend's house. I could see the side of her boyfriend's head to one side, kind of bouncing in and out of the frame. And then behind her, there was an old gentleman, sitting down on the couch, looking like he was watching TV or something, looking in another direction. Nothing out of the ordinary. We continued the conversation. I hopefully helped her, and then we hung up. Well, the next day I started talking to her again because I had met up with her over at my folks' house, and just matter-of-factly, I had asked her who was the old man in the background, because her boyfriend is Hispanic, and this was an old white man sitting on the couch behind her. And when I asked her, her eyes got really big, and she said, what are you talking about? It was just me and my boyfriend at the house at the time. And I said, no, there was an old man sitting on the couch right there behind you. And I thought it was weird because, your boyfriend is Mexican. And her eyes started to well up in tears, and she said that she, needed to call her boyfriend right away, and that she had been telling him that she thought something was weird, and that she had a dream about an old man in the house when she was staying over there with him, and really got freaked out and said that she had felt a presence in the house before that. And the weird thing is that it was just an old man. It didn't look like a ghost or ethereal or wispy or anything like that. It would just look like a person in the background. And it never looked at the camera, never moved, never did anything, just sitting there. And she's been really freaked out ever since then. And I just wanted to call into the podcast and see if you had any idea or any other experiences that you've heard of with ghosts or entities or anything showing up in the background of these FaceTime calls like that. So that's the story, and I appreciate the chance to share it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. I can't help but think as technology advances and we're continuously putting cameras in every little device we own, we're going to continue to catch more and more mysterious images, such as the image that Tony has described here in his call. We're already seeing several closed-circuit television cameras capture unexplainable events. We've also seen Nest cams, pet cams, capture strange, odd behavior. So it's only a matter of time before we start to see strange anomalies in programs like FaceTime and Skype. So I implore you all, while you're watching those kids play or those pets at that sporting event, keep your eyes open in the background of your FaceTime or Skype, and let me know if you see anything weird. Thank you again, Tony, for sharing that call. Now our next submission of the evening is a workplace submission from Sam in the state of Indiana.
Hi, Derek. This is Sam from Indiana. I do hope you can hear me. I'm using a Bluetooth headset. I'm on my break at work. I always listen to your podcast during shifts here on overnights. It really gets me through. But anyway, I'm calling to tell you about the first job I ever had. It was at a pizza parlor here in town called Joe's Pizza, and it's closed now. They opened a new restaurant inside of there, which I haven't been in yet. Honestly, I haven't been back in the building since my experience in there. But long story short, I was working there during college and worked a lot of late nights, and we were open till 11, and then, we'd stay over to close and get everything cleaned up and everything. So we'd be there till about midnight or 12:30. So there was one night that we were there. We'd had a particularly busy night, and we had one shelf. It's an old building. I mean, it's a very, very old building. It's part of what we call the depot district. It's near the old train depot, so a lot of buildings, sprung up around there about that time. And this particular building was one of the first to be built across from the old train depot. So we had a shelf that was one of the original shelves that used to be an old grocery store, the style where you walk in, there's the counter, and you look across the counter and you kind of tell the grocer what you need. So anyway, we had this shelf that had all the pizza boxes on it that we had already built and had stacked up for to-go orders, and I had been folding boxes to fill it back up. And when I filled the top shelf, which is where we put all of our 10-inch pizza boxes, I had to stand up on the counter to get up onto that top shelf. So I placed a stack of pizza boxes onto that top shelf, and as soon as the boxes hit it, all of the boxes on this probably 8-inch tall shelf, about, I'd say 12 feet long of just pizza boxes, exploded outward. They all flew out into the kitchen area, hitting one of them, went onto the rolling oven. We had to shut the oven off. It was this whole big thing, and there were 3 other people there with me, and we were all horrified. There was no sound to it or anything. It was like somebody had basically tilted that shelf forward, and it had all flown out, but it was such a distance. It was literally an explosion of pizza boxes flying off this shelf. And to this day, I've never had an explanation for it. It spooked me so bad that I didn't go back in. I felt unwelcome after that. I felt like I was targeted by whatever this was. And I've had several paranormal experiences. I'll probably call back with a few of them, but none that have been so wrong feeling, something that feels like it doesn't want you there. And to have, I can't imagine how many pizza boxes were on that shelf. It took us forever to stack them back up there. I don't know what kind of entity could have the power to be able to push. I don't know, Derek. I've never seen anything like it. But I don't know if that's classic poltergeist activity or if there's another way to explain it. I have no idea. But like I said, there were 3 other people there with me, and it was a scarring night, and we still talk about it to this day when we see each other. It's like, hey, you remember the pizza boxes? And yeah, absolutely. And they all have their own stories about the place, but that was the only one I ever had, the only experience I had, and I didn't go back. So thank you, appreciate it. Love the podcast, and hope that you can use the stories. Have a good one.
Thank you, Sam. Sounds pretty wild. Now, believe it or not, I actually have a logical explanation, or at least a possible logical explanation. I know a lot of restaurants have rodent problems. Rats, mice, that kind of thing. And oftentimes they will put out mice traps and sometimes even rat traps. Now, if you've ever seen a spring-driven rat trap, these things look like a mousetrap on steroids. They're 7, 8, 9 inches long, 4 or 5 inches wide, and can break your fingers. So my thought here is that maybe, just perhaps, one of these rat traps was up on this shelf, and Sam simply didn't see it. And when he threw the boxes on top of it, it sprung into action, tossing the rest of those boxes away from the wall. Now, I have a few problems with this little theory, of course. For starters, it would have made a heck of a noise. He most likely should have been able to hear it snap, and it probably would have jumped in the air. Secondly, I highly doubt they would put a rat trap where pizza boxes are supposed to be stacked. Typically, they're on the floor, in corners, in dark, dirty places. And third of all, you would think that Sam simply would have seen the rat trap at some point in this exchange. So it's entirely possible that this is what happened. But at the same time, it's also very unlikely because of those 3 elements that I mentioned. Thank you again, Sam, for sharing that call. Maybe somebody else out there has some ideas as to why something strange like that would take place. Now, I have a couple more calls to share with you guys this evening, but before I do, I need to get through a few of these little announcements. In addition to upcoming CryptidCon, I'm actually going to be at the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia on Saturday, September 21st. Now, I won't have a booth or anything like that. I'll be walking around, talking to people, hanging out at other people's booths, that kind of thing. I'm going to be a tourist for once. But that said, don't be afraid to come up and say hi if you happen to see me or any of the crew walking around. I'll try to remember to wear a Monsters Among Us podcast t-shirt to help pick me out of the crowd. If you enjoy the show and would like to engage with other fans, might I suggest our social media pages. We have accounts on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. In addition, we have a closed Facebook group where all kinds of fun things are passed back and forth. Simply search Monsters Among Us in each of those platforms to find those pages. Merchandise. I've got all kinds of merchandise left. Well, I've got some merchandise left. So if you're interested in picking up a t-shirt, sticker, hat, magnet, there's a couple other things in there. Now's your chance to do so. When I return from Mothman later this month, we're going to hit this hard and try to get a handful of new items in that shop as well. But if you're looking to support the show and get something in return, that's the best way to do it. And lastly, if you have a story you would like to share, simply call the hotline at 1-888-608-NIGHT. That's 1-888-608-6444. Or visit the website at monstersamonguspodcast.com and click on the Report Your Sightings tab. There you'll find a few other options to submit your story, one of which is completely anonymous. And on that note, our next story of the evening is one of the craziest things I've ever heard, and by far one of the craziest things I've ever played on this show. But for some strange reason, I don't think my leg is being pulled. The following story comes from Miguel.
Hey Derek, this is Miguel O'Hara. I was calling you because I was trying to relay this story from my dad from Mexico. I've been binge listening to your stories for the last, 2-3 days or so. And I've never heard anybody say this before, so I was thinking this would be an interesting story to tell you. So anyways, this is about 1958 or so. My dad grew up in Mexico, like I said. He lived in this little small town called Uriria. It's Yurira, Mexico. And basically, my uncle, and a couple of his friends were walking down the street. And apparently, it was like a nice day down there. And they were walking back from a forest or something. And as they were walking, they heard like this massive, like, neigh. Like, a horse was in trouble or something. So they're like, where's that noise coming from or whatever? And they turn around and they're trying to find this neigh. And so basically, you're not going to believe when I say this, but, per them, this is what happened. So they walked down this road for a little bit, and it's Mexico, so it's like this, paddle road or whatever. It's not like, some asphalt or whatever. And they walk up, and they see this black stallion that got caught in this bear trap. And they're like, oh, this helped the stallion, right? But as they're growing closer, they notice that, wait a minute, it's not a stallion. And, this is going to sound crazy, but the stallion had wings. And they're like, the stallion has wings, right? They freak out, and they start running, and they run to the town, and they tell everybody, yo, man, there's a stallion with freaking wings, up the road. Let's go help it. It's trapped. And they were like, you're freaking crazy. They don't believe them because they're just kids, whatever. But, some adults, were, seeing how terrified they were. So they're like, okay, let's go see if is it true or not. So they went back, and I say you not, about 10 people go over there, and you see the same damn thing trapped in this bear trap. And they're like, wait a minute, that's a freaking pegasus. This thing was about the size of a regular horse, and it was completely black and had these giant wings. The wings were, from what they were telling me, about the size of a person. So they were about 6 feet or so. And it's not like they someone super glued some wings on, a horse or whatever, because it actually ended up flying away. And, so they're out there being freaked out for a minute because they were, this horse thing was in pain. So the adult cranked the bear trap open, and it just hobbled around for a little bit. And, next thing you know, it ran off and flew away. And for the longest time, I thought my dad was playing tricks with me or whatever. So when I grew up older, I asked the other uncle that was there. He's like, no, that actually happened. So I was like, no way. Anyways, I never heard anybody say anything about freaking Pegasus before, but they all swear to it. Like I said, 30 or so people saw it. I thought it was interesting. I thought you'd get a kick out of it. Anyways, keep doing a good job with the show. And, bye.
Thank you, Miguel, for sharing your story. Okay. Pegasus. Now let's break this down a little bit. I don't believe there are too many people on this planet that truly believe that a Pegasus could be running around. I just don't. There's no proof of that in the fossil record whatsoever. There's no evidence of that in the natural world. There are no mammals with 6 limbs. Just none of this seems to add up whatsoever. So let's look at it a different way. Could there have been something wrong with this horse? And I have a hard time even coming up with what would cause a horse to grow 6-foot appendages out of its side. I don't believe there is any disease or anything that would cause such a deformity. So that leaves us with the other option. We're humans somehow to blame. We're fabricated wings glued onto this horse. Something along those lines. Now, as cruel as that sounds, stuff like that has been done in the past. I distinctly remember a Jersey Devil exhibit where some guy took a poor kangaroo and spray painted it and glued wings to it and did all this stuff and nearly killed the animal. So, the bottom line here is I honestly have no idea what to even make of this story. It sounds like Miguel is being truthful. It sounds like he's being genuine. But it also sounds like he's as skeptical as we are. So perhaps it's just simply a long-running gag that his father simply wouldn't let up on. Then again, stranger things have happened. Thank you again, Miguel, for taking the time to share your call. Next up, we hear from Aubrey in the state of Texas.
Hi, I'm Aubrey from Texas. I have a few stories I'd like to share, but this one is from my late father, passed away in 2007. This story has always intrigued me, probably got me very interested in the paranormal. It takes place in Kennesaw, Georgia, when he was a young boy, about 12 years old. He would sometimes go and spend the night at his grandmother's house, his grandmother that lived there. It was an old house, and it didn't have AC. And this was probably in probably about very early 1960s. He would sleep upstairs in the attic, and it was very hot and muggy, he said. Sometimes there would be wasps up there, and he hated going up there, but that's all the rooms she had would, put him up there, and that's where he would sleep. One night, he said that he was staying there. He woke up to what sounded like a loud cannon fire, a big boom. It woke him up out of a dead sleep. And then he started hearing gunfire right outside, following. So he jumps up and he goes and he looks out the window to see what all the commotion is. And he said it was right out of a movie. It was a war scene from the Civil War. He said he saw, as clear as day, soldiers fighting. And it was not right outside the house, but, he could see it maybe 300 to 400 feet away. But, he could see it. He could see them in their uniforms. He could see men bleeding and laying on the ground. And he was just standing there kind of in shock, like, what am I seeing? Am I awake? He said at that moment, he hears a rattling, the doorknob to the room, like somebody was trying to open it. So, he turns around thinking maybe it's his grandma, so he can, she probably heard all the noise and what's going on. And then a man walks in with what he said, he had gray hair and it looked like he had spectacles and he had a mustache, and he was wearing, he remembers he was wearing, looked like a white long apron, but it was covered in blood. And the man looked not directly at him, but he looked very tired and worn out, and he said he didn't even look at my father. He just went and sat down at the end of my father's bed and put his head in his hand like he was exhausted, and just kind of, not really directly speaking to my dad, but just kind of mumbled, there's just so much blood. I just can't take it. There's just so much. And then as soon as the man said that, he just vanished in front of him, and so did the noise outside. And so my father turned around and looked back out the window, and it was dark, and there was nothing. He didn't know what just happened. It was there, and then all of a sudden it was gone. And I didn't mention before, but when he did look outside, he did say it was daylight when he saw the war happening. But it was, in the middle of the night. So when he looked again, it was pitch dark. There was nothing. So I love your podcast, and I do have other stories I want to submit. But this one, I always made my dad tell me over and over as I was growing up, and it just fascinated me. And Civil War, everything about it has always fascinated me. I had an ancestor who was a lieutenant for the South, Lafayette George, who died in the Civil War, and it just always fascinates me. But thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. Now, strangely enough, I'm not sure it's a spirit or a ghost, that Aubrey is describing here, but rather a phenomenon known as a time slip. Now, essentially, a time slip causes the sufferer, or sometimes sufferers, to suddenly be thrust back in time to another era where they experience life as it was, sometimes even interacting with the people in this new period, before they find themselves suddenly back in their original timeline. There have been countless explanations offered to explain time slips, everything from time travel, wormholes, portals, and even aliens. But the simple truth is, no one has a clue what these time slips are, or even if they exist. But I can tell you that Aubrey's call certainly seems to fit the bill. Thank you again, Aubrey, for taking the time to share. And that brings us to our final call of the evening. Now, the subject for this call may sound familiar. Just like Roger's story, which we touched on earlier tonight, this call, too, deals with a subject that we've covered before. The following is Pat's story from the state of Maryland.
Hi, Derek. My name is Pat Rosenberger. I live in Westminster, Maryland, and I'm just calling to tell you about a sighting I had. I was a rural mail carrier here for 13 years, and this incident happened, I'm going to say about 6 or 7 years ago, but I just heard a similar incident when you were on Into the Fray with Shannon LeGros on episode 97, and it reminded me of what I saw, and I just wanted to call in and tell you about it. But anyway, I was delivering mail on a route, and this was a rural route, and we're in a farming community, and so this was pretty rural where I was, and I was going down the road. It was, I'm going to say late summer, and it was late afternoon, probably 3, 4 o'clock, and I'm delivering mail at a farmhouse, and the farmhouse the mailbox was across the street from the farmhouse, and the farmhouse was back a long lane. I couldn't even see the farmhouse, okay, but you had to go back this long lane to get to it, and on both sides of that lane was high cornfields. I happened to glance over. I'm very aware of my surroundings all the time. So I happened to glance over, and as I did, I noticed something ran across that lane, probably 30, 40 yards from me, and something ran across that lane that I thought was a dog, and my first thought was, oh, someone's dog is this, and so I paid a little more attention, and I noticed, oh my God, that's not a dog. What the heck is that? And I love, because I often see foxes and things like that on my route, but this was not a fox either, because I love to see foxes. This was not a fox, but it was about the size of a medium-sized dog. I'm going to say 2.5 feet, 3 feet tall, something like that. And it had a, I'm going to say, a reddish or grayish color to its legs and darker on its back, and it had its shoulders were bigger than the back of it, than its tail end, and as the fur on its back was blackish dark color, and as it got down toward its tail, it had spots all over it, like light-colored spots, like almost, it was really like a brindley color, but it had these light-colored spots on it. And I'm like, holy crap, what is that? I've never seen a dog like that. And it was became obvious to me, this was a wild animal. It had a furtive look. It wasn't like just a dog that was loose running around. It was in a hurry to get from one side of that cornfield, into the other. It didn't want to be seen, really. So I saw it for only about 5 seconds, probably. But I'm thinking, oh my God, what the hell is that? And so I got back to the, it was gone, and I got back to the post office. I was racking my brain. I couldn't think of what kind of animal that could be. my only thought was that like a dingo or something, that's all I could think. So I got back to the post office and I asked any, people, my friends there, has anybody ever seen anything like that? And nobody had any clue what it was. So I got home and I said, well, let me look up and see what a dingo looks like. And I did, and this totally was not a dingo. And so I'm like, I couldn't think of what else it could be, so I just kind of, I kind of let it go, but it's always been in the back of my mind for all these years. And just recently, I happened to see a picture of a hyena, but it wasn't just any hyena, it was a spotted hyena. And when I saw that picture, it flashed in my mind, oh my God, that's exactly what I saw. And all I can remember is, like I said, it looked like a spotted hyena, and they are not native to North America. And I do remember, though, I could not see its tail. I really don't. I didn't notice it. Did not certainly have a big bushy tail or anything like that. But I didn't, see that the rear end of it. So I didn't see the tail. I don't know what kind of tail it had, but it was not a big bushy tail. It had to have been hardly there, if anything.
Thank you, Pat. I really enjoyed that story. Now, I did a little digging, and it seems that the Maryland area, at the very least, has seen its fair share of escaped hyenas. There was one wildlife enclosure in particular near the city of Pittsburgh that actually saw 2 hyenas get loose in the year 2010. Now, of course, I don't know which part of Maryland Pat is in, and I don't know when this encounter took place, so it's pretty much impossible for me to correspond escaped hyenas with her sighting. That said, this wouldn't be the first time that a hyena was mentioned in a cryptid story. I realize I've touched on this more than a few times, but the case of the beast of Gévaudan, the wolf-like beast that attacked and killed upwards of 100 people in southern France in the 1600s. Now, many people suspect, based on eyewitness encounters, that the creature that attacked those people may have been a spotted hyena. Now, of course, that does absolutely nothing to support Pat's case, but what it does do is let us know that we're not at the top of the food chain, necessarily, in that area. If something large and in charge, such as a spotted hyena, is loose in the countryside of Maryland, I believe there are a handful of people that are in some trouble. And that's going to do it for this episode. Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Additional support is provided by Addie Lloyd, Warren Ponabbott, and Tony Bell. All audio used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. And the music you're hearing is from Coag Music. Thank you all for listening, and until next week. Hi there. Thanks for sticking around. Unfortunately, I'm super short on time tonight, so instead of reading a submission, I'm going to play a call. So the following is Jay's call from Canada.
Hi Derek, this is Jay. This isn't very exciting. I doubt you'll be able to use it. But when I was working, I do tile contracting. I was doing work in a house. It's an older house, at least for my area. I live in Vancouver. The area is called New West. It's got some older homes in it. The house was built in the 1940s. Anyway, I was doing a whole lot of work in there. I was probably there for about a week and a half as everything progressed. And the whole time I was working during the day, the client and his father-in-law were always there. I never work during night, whatever. I work normal hours as much as everybody thinks when you're self-employed. You work whenever they want you to. You don't. You try and keep it 9 to 5 as much as you can. Well, it's under the crunch right before Christmas. I actually wound up finishing this job on Christmas Eve. Not that that matters. A few days before that, I was working there late into the night. I think I got out of there at 11. But everybody else left probably 7 o'clock. And as soon as they left, I was the only one in this house. I felt very uneasy. I felt like I was being watched. Very uncomfortable feeling. I work by myself a lot in very industrial areas, big buildings. I've never had this feeling before, old houses all over the place. But anyway, I felt really uneasy, like somebody was just staring at me. I kept looking away out into the hallway, making sure nobody was staring at me from the hall while I was in the bathroom. Anyway, as I'm working on this wall, I was tiling, doing mosaic up on the tap wall. It doesn't matter. I heard a big crash and a bang, and I came out running into the hallway. And I already felt uneasy, but my level, which was leaning up against the wall, fell down. Fair enough, old house. You're moving around in and out of the tub, walking up and down the hall to my towel cutter. Vibrations happen, it falls. Okay, fine. Walked away, went back to work. A little while later, my other level, 6-foot level, falls down to the ground as well. Okay, again, can happen. But I'm in there working away again, and I had a stack of tile, probably 2 feet high, 1 foot by 2 foot ceramic tiles piled up that I was using for the walls. And I had my impact gun, so it's one of those short drills, and it had the bit in it. It was laying on its side with the drill bit out, and in that position it's impossible to flip over. I can understand something happening when it's up on its battery pack, but it was laying on its side. There's no possible way it could flip over. And I come out after the next crash bang, and my drill is across the hallway on the ground. It was originally sitting on that 2 foot high stack of tile. As I continue on, wanted to finish off because it was Christmas right around the corner. I go upstairs into this tiny little ensuite we were building, and I was finishing off the floor tile. And as I go up the stairs, I wear glasses, and there was lights on everywhere. It was at night. And the reflection of my glasses from my eye, I could see somebody standing behind me. It was a woman in a dress. I whipped around, frightened, nothing there. I continued working, and the rest of the night, up and down those stairs, just at the stairs, not anywhere else, I kept seeing a reflection of this woman behind me. I kept getting the feeling that somebody was moving around just outside my view. It was very uncomfortable. Now, maybe I'm just paranoid, working in an old house, who knows? But I've had this really uncontrollable feeling of depression, and it stems from that night. I don't really know. It's very weird. However, if it was normal, I wouldn't be calling you. Anyway, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it. Thank you very much. I'm a big fan. Bye.
Thank you, Jay. Now, it's funny, I used to hear about it a lot, in the 90s and early 2000s, but lately it doesn't seem to be brought up as often. The old cliche that if you do remodeling or, you change something in your home, you're more likely to trigger some sort of ghostly activity. Given the activity that Jay was doing, I'm wondering if that's what triggered all this in the first place. Thank you, Jay, for submitting your call, and thank you for sticking around to the end of the program. Have a great night.